The word for today is brain drain, or reality warp, or culture shock. The chauffeur is idling outside the Kansas City Life Insurance Company, waiting to drive Miss Kitty Russell, proprietor of the Long Branch Saloon, downtown to the regional office of the Humane Society of the United States, of which her alias, Amanda Blake, is reportedly a national board member. He drives a small car without much room and without air conditioning, and this is a July rush hour. Miss Kitty, 47, lifts one leg at a time and backs in as ladylike as possible. She is squeezed behind the dash, and her purse crowds her chin. That's okay, Miss Kitty says. I love small cars. It's a great story Miss Kitty tells. It starts in 1976 in the Arizona legislature, but the flow of traffic down 31st Street seems oblivious to its magnitude. Thanks to Amanda Blake and various Arizona humane groups, it is now illegal in Arizona to put most stray and unclaimed dogs to sleep by any other method than an injection of sodium pentobarbital, since rapid decompression chambers had been abused in Arizona pounds. The theory behind the chambers: hypoxia. They would thin out the atmosphere and reduce the amount of oxygen in the dog's tissue. Mature dogs would pass out in 10 seconds, enter the euphoria stage, and die a beautiful death. Rush hour honkers force the chauffeur onto a wrong exit, and he heads back, circling the Liberty Memorial. It's hot. The downtown skyline of Kansas City rises behind them and looks nice. Sure does, Miss Kitty says. They go down Main. But you see, that was the theory. Employees of county and city pounds in Arizona were often abusing the chambers, stuffing more than one dog in. Sometimes underage dogs with greater tolerances. And then slamming the doors and walking away. The chamber seals and valves would have to be properly maintained, and they usually weren't. So too often the dog would not die beautifully, but suffer the cruel torture of bleeding, bloating, eyes popping out of sockets, sometimes even surviving the ordeal, only to be run back through again. Yellow light ahead. Miss Kitty gasps. They run it. She resumes. It was an extended session of the legislature. The House accepted their bill, but they had trouble in the Senate. People are mean when money's at stake, Miss Kitty says. And people had money tied up in those chambers, and oh, did I get threats. One guy at a county pound said, if I lose my job on this bill, I'm gonna get Amanda Blake and all her damn animals. So I had to get extra security. The chauffeur ran a red this time. The carburetor is suspect, and the car coughs and dies at the light. Miss Kitty sighs. By the time we get downtown, the Senate has passed the bill by one vote. Amanda Blake told enraged decompression chamber owners that the chambers make good planters. And it's just one more high noon shootout that ends just like you knew it would. Amanda Blake strolls up East 12th Street to the Argyle building. Up on the top floor, she gets the news from Humane Society Regional Director Ann Gonerman. What's new? Well, she says, Missouri is one of the worst states as far as violating the Federal Horse Protection Act. Trainers of the Tennessee Walking Horse are still soaring their horses to get that livelier, prize-winning gait. And with only $300,000 budgeted nationwide to enforce the Horse Protection Act, what's to stop them? They are still getting complaints about owners of show dogs who leave pets locked in their hot cars while celebrating their ribbons. People are wacko, Amanda Blake says. And the furriers are acting up again. You could see it coming when the plaza flood washed everyone's old furs away. And the keepers at the Kansas City Zoo are depressed. Ms. Gonerman heard they wanted to write Amanda Blake because of her reputation for humane activism. And finally, there are still the creeps around every corner who think abusing animals is kind of sharp. Trainers, furriers, creeps, senators, this is no laughing matter. Those are just the demented people, Amanda Blake says in her bourbon voice. The kind of people I'd like to make lampshades out of. Demented people. Ha, ha, ha. Amanda Blake still laughs in the full-bodied Dodge City manner, but the word for her today is humane. Amanda Blake, who is likely to enter the 21st century in reruns playing a liberated saloon owner of the 19th century, is kind to all animals and regards it as a blessed, noble cause, and stands prepared to thrash anyone who disagrees. I'm sorry. In Kansas City, to attend a meeting of the Kansas City Life Insurance Board of Directors. She is the only woman. Amanda Blake also met with the Humane Society and the local animal kind group. She used Unity Village to film and tape television and radio spots urging humane treatment, and in the meantime spread the word against the creeps and the demented who persist in their abuse. In this role, there is some distance between the mysterious Miss Kitty Russell and the free-thinking, knee-slapping animal activist that is Amanda Blake. For example, she is dead set against the cruelty seen in rodeos and sees no irony in that. Once she led a small contingent to the Colorado State House to urge legislation against it. The crowds were not sympathetic. I was scared. There was only about 6 of us, and of course, the bill died in committee. Walking out, some goofball comes up to me and says, "I'll never watch Gunsmoke again." And I say, "That's fine with me." And I just sock him. Clearly, Amanda Blake is the first woman to record a word for unity and connect with a vicious roundhouse in support of the same noble cause. But that's just part of her repertoire. She's a series of contradictions. She's one of the original television belles, reigning for 19 years, and now sitting on a huge hunk of television heritage. Still, Gunsmoke lore does not intrigue her. In fact, an invitation to check out one of Kansas City's most notorious single saloons she finds bizarre and gives wide berth. I'm not Miss Kitty. I'm Amanda Blake. Miss Kitty has checked the bustles and the curls, and I do not play her anymore. I'm Amanda Blake. Amanda Blake is no longer the Zane Grey siren she once portrayed, but still commands puffs of vibrant color with her entrances. In 1950, when she signed with MGM at 19, she was a publicist's dream with her electric blue eyes and a blazing bonfire on her head for hair. Today, that bonfire still simmers orange, and the blue eyes are candid behind huge sunglasses. She wears dark silver jewelry, brown freckles along her arms and neck, which partly bedeck the slightest of scars that stretches east to west, ear to ear. She fills in gaps in her colorful sentences with flourishes of her startlingly long red nails. Kitty was a tremendously liberated person, probably the first fictional liber. Me, I don't know. I know I was never into the Hollywood scene. I found it boring, superficial, unreal. She preferred to be animated, deep and resoluted, rather like any 19th century woman who ran the busiest building in a wild town. Amanda Blake's real name was Beverly Neal. When she signed, she searched among the likes of Miranda, Victoria, and Belinda before she settled upon Amanda to suggest Protestant, bedrock, strength and fortitude, and, contrarily, because she identified with the flighty Amanda of Noel Coward's Private Lives. As for Blake, short, snappy, no problem. The fraternity that, years ago, was Hollywood television writers considered her a flake since she preferred out-of-town ranches to Hollywood penthouses and lived alone. She ran through 2 marriages early, which was apparently big news. They deemed her available and printed her measurements. She has always been a natural to headline writers. Whenever Amanda Blake made news, you'd read how Miss Kitty was biding her time, or Miss Kitty was to be wed. It's insane, isn't it? Amanda Blake says while leafing through a pile of clippings that represented what Kansas Cityans read about her. Decree to Miss Kitty, she reads from a 1967 article. Amanda Blake, who plays Kitty in the television series Gunsmoke, was granted an uncontested divorce yesterday from her 3rd husband. I love it. What's the next one? Miss Kitty marries again. Amanda Blake married again 2 days after that divorce, to Frank Gilbert, her 4th husband. She quit Gunsmoke in 1974. When she says she tired of commuting to and from Phoenix to shoot. I was getting to be a person I didn't like. I thought my job was getting in the way of my work. My work is animals. Since then, she has worked full-time, but only occasionally. Accepting parts when she feels like it. It's a nice feeling, not having to go around with your hat in your hand. With some pieces, they're a piece of crap. I'm not going to do crap, and that's all there is to it. When Miss Kitty made real news this January, it showed up in the same Wire column that celebrates dreadful tragedies that befall former stars. The story of Amanda Blake's cancer appeared under Miss Kitty Survives Real Peril. In the later months of 1976, Amanda Blake noticed a lump under her tongue. Like many people, she says, she put it off. She didn't tell anyone and avoided seeing a doctor until after the holidays. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. For those 3 months, I wasn't telling anybody. I didn't even tell my husband. I was just stewing in my own juice. I was breaking down emotionally. I couldn't stop crying. It was absolute, complete depression. She says she made the resolution to see a doctor herself. A visit confirmed that the lump, a tumor, was malignant. She transferred to the MD Anderson System Cancer Center Tumor Institute in Houston, Texas. In an 8-hour operation, surgeons removed the bottom half of her tongue and the floor of her mouth. They transplanted thigh tissue to her mouth, and slowly she learned to speak again. It wasn't that bad. I did my own therapy, and it was just a few sounds I had trouble with. And the floor of my mouth and bottom half of my tongue were new. And I just had to get it working. I'd do local phonics television, and I'd videotape them at home and listen to see if I heard anything wrong. I'm highly critical, and I was satisfied when I couldn't detect anything. She estimates it took her 12 months to climb out of the depression the cancer threw her into. I don't take anything for granted anymore. I have seen some sights at the Houston hospital that I really can't even... Look, I mean really bad stuff. People with half of faces, parts of heads, and that's just one section of the institute. Just the head and neck department where I was. Subsequent checkups have shown no recurrence of the cancer. The cancer news broke a year later and arrived in Kansas City last year, just as she arrived to become a director for Kansas City Life. Company president Joe Bixby met Amanda Blake and her husband on a fishing trip in Mexico and invited her to be on the board. She's a member of the audit committee and brings attention to the firm. She receives a director's fee. I'm Amanda Blake, she says, who happened to be Kitty Russell. What I have to say might be listened to a little more closely. That's another reason for her position with the Humane Society, but in this case, she is no dilettante. On her 4-acre spread near Phoenix, she maintains a tropical aviary and wandering streams for her menagerie, and she considers herself and her husband among the few capable of breeding second-generation cheetahs in captivity. Cheetahs rank high on the danger of extinction list. She has sold 2 cheetahs to the St. Louis Zoo, and last spring the Kansas City Zoo approached her for 2 cheetahs on a breeding loan. Amanda Blake was scared off by the unfavorable zoo publicity at the time and is still reluctant to send her cheetahs to someplace she isn't sold on. Last spring, she toured the nursery and cheetah area briefly and remains hesitant. You know the baby house, where they keep the baby orangutan, the baby gorilla, and all? Well, I'm sure that glass they have in the door to the baby gorilla is strong, but so is that baby gorilla. He was pounding and pounding on that, and it scared me. There could be an accident out there. In front of the camera, she is Miss Kitty. With the approval of her Humane Society peers, Miss Kitty films a unity-written spot for the word humane. The Humane Society is a non-profit organization and cannot lobby in the conventional sense. But there are no restrictions on Amanda Blake, whom people tend to listen to because of the TV star she once happened to be. One of the reasons I support the Humane Society of the United States, she reads, is because of the very meaning of the word humane. To be compassionate, ring and sympathetic toward other human beings, and all animals, is quite an ideal to reach for. But the world has need of such ideals. Albert Schweitzer said, "To the man who is truly ethical, a life is sacred, including that which, from the human point of view, seems lower on the scale." If this reverence for all of life is the highest ethic, isn't it worth trying to live our lives accordingly? I'm Amanda Blake. And remember, the word is humane. Fade. There, she says, after the shooting. That should do something. The abusers, the creeps, the guys who threw real mules off that bridge in Patton. The producers who killed thousands of bees while filming The Swarm. The greyhound runners, the rattlesnake roundup, and the furriers again. The people who kill leopards, Amanda Blake says, just to put a coat on some stupid broad's back.